When it comes to some of the hardest working vehicles in this country, what usually comes to mind? If you're more of a family person, that might mean your family SUV or crossover. If you're more of an enthusiast, that might mean you dream of some of the fastest, the hottest, and the coolest cars on the road, or maybe even something as small as driving a modified daily driver. But if you're the sort of person who's more adventurous in life and really wants to get the very best and maximum out of everything, well, you need a vehicle that sort of matches that same aura. Something that's not afraid to go out in the middle of nowhere and come back covered in filth and grime from head to foot. Something that's more like, oh, I don't know. Something that's a bit more like that. So some of you may remember the last time I drove a new generation Tundra like this, I was sitting in a Tundra Limited, which to me is definitely not a bad way to be introduced to the newest incarnation and a revolution of one of the more noteworthy names in terms of half-ton trucks. But somewhere deep inside of my soul, not just as an enthusiast, but more so looking from the outside in, I kind of felt like that version was missing something. Yes, I know it had quite a lot of creature comforts, and it was a great all-around package for somebody who just wants a truck, you know, just wants something to drive that's got all the goodies in it. But I feel like half-tons always need to have that sort of aggression and a little bit more of something out of the ordinary, something outlandish, if you will, to kind of set them apart from just your everyday pickup. And boy, have my prayers been answered through and through with the arrival of this beast. Yep, the TRD Pro is making its presence known, and I gotta say, I could not be happier, because everything about the TRD Pro is just, it's turned up to the max. And specifically, if you're talking performance, I-Force Max is the term you need to know, because somewhere within this new boxed frame chassis is a 3.5 liter twin turbocharged 6-cylinder, a 10-speed transmission in the middle, and yet in all of this, it's a hybrid. But don't think for a minute that just because this Goliath of the Tundras has a hybrid namesake somewhere in there, that it suddenly becomes some eat your greens and following Priuses everywhere sort of liaison. Oh no, this thing is a proper monster. And TRD shouldn't stand for turd, and it shouldn't stand for Toyota Racing Development. That name needs to stand for totally rampaging demon, because that is what this truck is, making 437 horsepower and almost 600 foot-pounds of torque. I mean, just... But you know what's even better than those performance figures? It's the sound that this truck makes. Because even though it has 6 cylinders, and albeit it has 2 turbochargers as well, it doesn't sound like your normal V6. It doesn't have that high-pitched whine or scream like you might get out of, say, a V6 Camry. It almost sounds like this truck's voice got lost somewhere between the monster's throat and the belly of the beast. And you don't even have to poke it that hard. Just give it a little prod. Oh, God, she sounds like an animal. Oh. And did I mention this one has a TRD exhaust on it to even help with the matter? I'll take some more of that, please. Speaking of the belly of the beast, if you think this thing, just because it has its little hybrid components mixed in with this monstrous heart and all the goodies underneath, including like 4-wheel drive and whatnot, if you're thinking that this thing will get any kind of good gas mileage, you're wrong. This thing right now, as I'm seeing it on my dash, is showing about 15.5 miles per gallon. And keep in mind, during the time that I've had it, I've primarily been driving it on the highway. I can't imagine what it would be like if you only drove this thing around town. But you know, in the midst of me being so elated to finally be driving the biggest and baddest Tundra of them all, there's still something that's been knocking around in this brain of mine that just kind of miffs me even more than usual, which is that I see so many people that I know personally and otherwise, they buy these trucks for the ungodly price that they cost, even before shrinkflation happened, and they don't really use them for their intended purpose. This truck is built to eat nature alive, and Toyota didn't just put a fully built TRD off-road suspension that lifts this thing right up in the air. They didn't put things like that on this truck for no reason. It's built to go into the middle of nowhere and cause absolute chaos. It's not built to take the kids to school or do the daily grocery run. So why do people still do that? Oh, and if you're thinking that that off-road suspension underneath is somehow any kind of beneficial to you in terms of ride quality, maybe make things a little more comfortable, even though it's already pretty comfortable sitting in these lazy boys of front seats that are heated, cooled, the driver's seat has a memory, stuff you'd expect out of a more expensive truck. But as for the suspension, no. I wouldn't say it's a Cadillac, but nor does it feel like I'm driving on boulders either. But, well, that and the fact that the roads around Houston aren't the greatest either. But I'll tell you what, I have felt just about every nook, cranny, crevice, pebble, you name it, along these streets, and it feels like everything is coming up from the tires, through the suspension, and into my back. So, would I say it's the most comfortable of the Tundras? No. But it definitely feels like one of the widest trucks you will ever drive. When you're on a narrow 2-lane road like what I'm on right now, it feels like not only are the front corners of my hood touching the yellow line in the middle and the white line on the side, but on more than one occasion during the few days that I've had this truck already, I've had cars of all shapes and sizes dodging off to the side of the road, thinking that somehow the side of this truck is gonna hit them, even though I'm perfectly dead straight in my lane. So it has its drawbacks. I'm not gonna lie, it's not perfect, but there's no denying it still is a monster no matter which way you look at it. As if the driving dynamics weren't enough to convince one that this is truly the biggest and baddest Toyota Tundra that you can buy on the market today, well then just looking at it, for one, it requires a pair of sunglasses in this case, because the optional solar octane paintwork that we have on this example here is, like I said, the loudest color that I've ever seen on any car, truck, or SUV, and quite frankly, it's one of the brightest things I've seen outside of a club dance floor. But speaking of options, minus the paintwork, everything else here is completely standard, and the way that Toyota has put this off-road package together, it really shows a much more aggressive stance on things. I mean, look at the size of the grille, for example. It is absolutely huge. It is the Heritage grille design, so you have Toyota spelt out across the upper part. And speaking of the upper part, you may also notice these little amber lights here. There's also one in the corner of each of the front fenders. That is a US government mandate, meaning that any vehicle over 80 inches wide has to have some form of amber lights hidden across the front of the vehicle, or if you're like a heavy-duty truck, you may see them up on the roof. But Toyota has kind of jazzed them up a little bit, because if you look inside, you can actually see they say TRD inside each of the individual lights. But speaking of lighting, there's no getting past the factory LED light bar hidden here in the middle. It is one of the brightest lights I have ever seen, and it's even brighter than the paintwork, believe me. It also has a 360 camera on this one. You have the sensors for things like the dynamic radar cruise control, forward collision warning, and so on. And then as you get lower, you have LED fog lights that are a bit on the small side, but they do their job, and they are festooned with this new digital camo trim. Now this trim is not just here on the front bumper, it's also here on the fenders, and it also translates to the rear bumper as well. But in a more helpful sense, because this truck is just so damn big, you also get the intuitive park assist that goes across the front and the rear. And as much as I keep calling this truck an absolute monster, this is in fact not the biggest configuration you can get for the new generation Tundra. And of course that boils down to what cab you pick, what size bed you have. The details just go on and on. But in this case, with the Crew Max cab configuration, a 5.5-foot bed, and a 145.7-inch wheelbase, this truck you see before you still rings in at 233.6 inches long and 81.6 inches wide, which means on paper she is still a big girl after all. And I do love some big women, so this is right up my alley. But also right up my alley, aside from the digital camouflage here on the fender flares, is the TRD Pro specific wheels. I've always loved the wheel choices that TRD and Toyota put on their Pro models, and these are no exception. 18-inch wheels, matte black, forged by BBS, and they are wrapped in 285/65 series Falcon Wild Peak all-terrain tires from the factory. But if you're the sort of person who nerds out over little details, first of all, love the little red trim on the center caps, but you look in the fender well, and what is that? Oh, that's the TRD skid plate that goes underneath. And also, you can get a glimpse of the TRD off-road suspension up in here, which gives this thing an extra 1.1 inches of overall ground clearance. And it's at this point now that I must address a couple of grievances that I have with the TRD Pro specifically. To start with the amount of heat that comes out of this engine bay here, you notice what look like hood louvers that say TRD Pro across them instead of, you know, iForce Max or iForce like you get on a standard Tundra. They're fake. They don't go anywhere. They don't do anything. They're just there for stylistic sake. I would have preferred these to be real heat extractors, or at least, you know, maybe cut slits in them to sort of vent the heat out, because this truck does get pretty hot, especially being a hybrid with all of the electronic components that need their own cooling as well. But if that wasn't insane enough, look at the standard mirror choice here. I mean, I know I focus on mirrors a lot, usually because they're power folding or they have a camera in them, which these are power folding and they also have a camera in them underneath, but they are massive. They look like they come off of a 3500 heavy duty pickup, not a half-ton Toyota Tundra. And they have their own little tricks as well. Aside from the power folding and, you know, little turn signal on the side, they have puddle lights in the lower corners. You have this sort of blind spot looking mirror down here in the bottom, even though it does come with blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert. And if you still think that these mirrors are simply not big enough, there is a button down by the driver's left knee that can actually extend these mirrors out even farther. Just completely unnecessary for a half-ton truck. But we go up top, and what's that? Oh, that's a panoramic sunroof. Always a nicety to have, standard as I would expect. And we also have Toyota's standard advanced keyless access. The key is still a little bit boring, being that everything is on the front and there's absolutely nothing on the rear. It would have been cool to see like TRD Pro stamped across the back of it or something, not just, you know, the little Toyota badge. But you have lock, unlock, you can release the bed or the tailgate. You also have panic and the releasable key blade that comes out of the bottom. But inside of these black plastic door handles here, again, they're not color coded, so kind of takes away from the higher price tag look. You have all the touch points that you use to unlock and lock the vehicle. So right now it's unlock. If you want to lock it, you just lay your finger to the little indentation. You can see the mirrors fold in. And if you want to unlock it, you just get in like normal. But now comes the big question. What exactly is the TRD Pro capable of as a pickup truck? And to answer that, we have to talk about payload and towing. But before we do, just a few minor details worth noting. Before even getting to the back, in typical Tundra fashion, if you actually look at this back window, it may look like one solid sheet of glass, which it is, but that is actually a power operated rear window. You can slide that all the way down, and if per se you have some taller objects like a long piece of wood in your back bed and you don't want it sticking out that way, you can actually put it through that back window when it's down and put it into the cab of the truck. But speaking of being in the bed, almost 1,500 pounds worth of payload for this four-wheel drive TRD Pro is what can fit back there. But even more impressive is what happens when you hook up something to the Class 4 tow hitch, standard again on the TRD Pro. Would you believe it if I told you that this hybridized truck could tow over 11,100 pounds? That is just mind-blowing that we're in an area where a half-ton can tow 5 figures worth of payload. But, you know, let's say you want to put something in the back bed, for example. You could pull the latch on the tailgate, but that's too easy. You could use the key fob. That's too easy too. I mean, Toyota thought of something though. This little button right here on the side of the taillight. Would you believe what it is? And once you get inside the bed, which of course looks pretty cavernous as any pickup truck normally would, you do have quite a few cool things back here. To start with, you have a 120 volt power outlet hidden into the side. You have LED bed lighting, and if you need to tie stuff down, because obviously this doesn't have a tonneau cover like most aftermarket companies would provide, you can see you have bed cleats up there on the side as well. Now, I have actually put this bed to some use. I actually got a new entertainment center, and I also got a new couch for my apartment, and both of these fit easily in the back of this bed. Did I mention at any point during this review already that this truck is absolutely massive? Because if I didn't, I think the point that drives it home more than any other aspect of it is getting inside this cabin. Because I thought the prior generation Tundra was big enough. No, that pales in comparison to the size of this. The dashboard looks like it's a mile wide. You guys are over there on the passenger window, and I feel like I'm looking at you from the other end of a football field because, I mean, just the space in here is unreal. However, not everything is as oversized and gargantuan as you might expect. For example, the steering wheel. I actually like the steering wheel. I saw it in the Sequoia and in the Tundra that I drove prior to. And this one, a little bit more special. You got TRD, of course, emblazoned big enough across the bottom of the wheel with a nice little red stripe across the top. It's leather wrapped, it's perforated, it's heated. It has all the things you want. The buttons are a little bit big, but then again, everything is the same. Toyota safety sense, volume, voice recognition, Bluetooth, you get the idea. Everything else though in here is just oversized. I mean, the screen's in front of you, for Pete's sake. There's got to be a keyboard that pops out of here somewhere, right? Is it under here? Is it up here? No, I don't think so. I mean, is there a... I mean, the center console's big enough, don't you think? But there's no mouse in there either. This is a laptop screen. That's what this infotainment screen is, and you'll see how it works here in a moment. But just everything else in here is over the top. Speaking of, look down by your left knee and there's even more craziness. Normally a lot of Toyotas that I drive or test, there's just a lot of blank buttons down there. This one, everything from auto high beam assist, heated steering wheel. You remember that little trick I showed you with the mirrors, how they go out a little bit further? Yeah, the button for that, it's down there too. And that crazy light bar that's up there that's supposedly more blinding than ever, the button's down here as well. And it's about that big. So again, just over the top, everything going on in here. But once you finally turn this truck on and bring it to life, everything in here just suddenly becomes a colorful mass of lights and just technology everywhere. Like I said, the screen in front of you, over 12 inches from corner to corner. The tachometer, front and center, much larger as to be expected with pretty much everything else we've seen thus far. And it has every other piece of information you want, from your woeful MPGs, that is of course to be expected with a truck like this, even though it is a hybrid. And of course you have things like your battery life remaining in your iForce Max powertrain. And that's all fine, but then this right here. And starting with the screen, I mean, what more do I need to say about it? Now, I mean, you'd have to be straight up blind to miss the giant screen that we're talking about here. And if you're still not familiar with everything going on in here, it's basically a 14-inch smartphone. This is Toyota's newest Highlights infotainment system. You can pinch and scroll here on the factory navigation, again, just like you would find on, say, Google Maps, which, speak of the devil, this does have wireless Android Auto, wireless CarPlay, so you needn't have to worry about plugging your phone into some random USB and having your cord become a tangled mess. If you want to access Android Auto, it's right at the top of the screen. You can pretty much go through absolutely everything you need to. But if you're not satisfied with the smartphone connectivity, which this one has had a few little connectivity issues here and there, you can just push Toyota right at the top of the menu and it brings you right back to the factory setting. Other tabs, audio, Bluetooth phone, vehicle settings, and then of course general settings, just to name the basics. But above everything else, the one thing that Toyota has always done well is give their higher end vehicles a hell of a stereo system. This one, certainly no exception. Factory JBL audio with Grace Note clarifying technology. You have Sirius XM satellite radio, and just like all the others, this thing really speaks for itself.
This is paradise. Yo.
Aside from the screen, however, everything else in here is pretty basic but functional. Dual zone climate control system, heated ventilated seats, all stuff you would expect. Then you have these sort of piano keys down here kind of in the middle. Things like trailering control, your different camera views, traction control, locking the rear diff, all stuff you would expect in a higher end off-road based pickup. One of my other favorite things though in terms of technology is the vertical Qi wireless charger. No more slipping it into pockets, no more placing it flat, no more hidden compartments. It's right here. It does exactly what it says. I've had no issues actually charging my phone, surprisingly, because I have had issues with the prior generations of the Qi wireless charger and some of Toyota's other cars and trucks. But other than that, I mean, it's everything that you need and nothing that you don't. And again, just like everything else, it's a bit over the top. And when Toyota calls this thing the Crew Max, they ain't just talking about the U-Crew, they talking about the whole crew. Because as much space as I have up in the front at over 6 feet tall, I have just as much space sitting here in the back. It's absolutely insane. I've been in so many pickup trucks of various cab configurations, but when I've been in the bigger ones, kind of like this with 4 full-size doors, I often find myself still a little scrunched up. I don't feel like I have, I mean, God, look at how much room is here. It's ridiculous. I can fit my whole hand sideways between my knees and the back of the seat. And this seat is exactly where I drive it. But yeah, I mean, you still get quite a bit of amenities aside from the stuff at the back of the console, like cup holders, a separate piece of storage, which, speaking of storage, if you're thinking that there's more under the seats, you are correct. These rear seats will actually fold upright and you can actually store stuff underneath the back seats. So not only can you put stuff across the floor, which there's plenty of room for that, you can still put stuff underneath the seats and even have room for your phone in the back of the console. There's a USB and USB-C plug back here, and even a 400 watt or 120 volt alternating current household plug style outlet. And also, if you get thirsty, there's a nice little middle armrest here with a couple of cup holders. Nice touch. And just like that, after a super fun-filled and action-packed day, we are back here at my apartment complex. And guys, I don't know what else to say. This really is the biggest and baddest Tundra that you can buy. Yes, I know it's expensive, and yes, I know it's a bit leery in some cases, but God, what a truck. I mean, seriously, if you've got the money to spend and you really want to show the world that you are just over the top in every single way, this is the member of the Tundra family you want to drive around in. But anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this review or perhaps you learned something about the Tundra TRD Pro today, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, and also while you're at it, hit the subscribe button down below, because trust me, I always appreciate the support and I want to continue doing stuff like this, which would not be possible without subscribers and viewers like yourselves and partnerships like Toyota USA. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the review, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care, everybody, and stay safe.